The first thing I want to ask is, you came to the advocacy session, and I want to know by a raise of hands, how many of you do advocacy? Right. How many of you are just curious and want to know like what's going on? Okay. So for the people who do advocacy on their day-to-day basis, we can start feeling hopeless because we study so many bad things that are going on, so many horrible things that are happening to our planet, that are happening to our health. Like, after all the speeches this morning, and I am familiar with many of the studies that were referenced in most of the talks, and I just felt so down. And I'm here to give you hope, because without hope there is no action, and without action there's no hope. So lawyers try to use many different strategies to try to achieve our objectives. And my organization, as an organization of lawyers, starts thinking, okay, so I have a problem. The problem is plastic. Plastic is bad for your health, it's bad for climate, it's bad for the environment, for ecosystems. How do I solve it? Do I have the laws in place to attack it from an environmental perspective? We'll see that there are some laws in place, but they're not sufficient, and as many of you have said, regulation moves slowly in aspects that are really important. So we went to areas that maybe have not been used to tackle this problem, and we went to private law. And okay, so who's responsible for this pollution? Who's putting all this trash and these toxic chemicals in the substances that we are in contact with every day, and that nature has to cope with? And it's companies. So we are on the side of working on policy advocacy. We're trying to do advocacy with companies. And when we go to speak to companies, we cannot say to companies, please be good, please care about the environment. We know you have good feelings, because many times companies don't have feelings. We need to speak in the same language that companies think. Money. Plastic, you can go and say to companies now, plastic is bad for your business. And if you're talking to a company director, you can tell to that company director, and plastic is bad for you. And I'm going to explain why. So I'm not going to repeat everything that was said this morning and that has been said in the session about the effects of plastic on human health. I think we have more information that we can absorb in one day. Plastic and climate change, the presentations that came before me, like plastic is the fossil fuel industry's plan B. Basically, all the fossil fuel, they're not going to be able to burn. They want to make into plastic. And after that, they want to burn it in incinerators. So just on plastic and climate change, I want to give something that horrifies me. And it's a brief statistic. I know we were given recommendations not to use many statistics, but by 2030, the life cycle emissions associated with plastic are going to be equivalent to 300 coal-fired plants, and to more than 600 coal-fired plants by 2050. If we continue using and producing plastic at the rate we're doing today, we're never going to meet the Paris Climate Agreement targets. Never. And we know that the use of plastic and the induced demand for plastic is growing. So if you care about climate, you need to care about plastic. We know that plastic has created a biodiversity crisis, not just because animals ingest it, they get all these problems when they eat it, because it transports toxic chemicals inside of them, because it creates these rafts that we were explained about this morning, like the surface is more friendly for some creatures than water. So it creates little islands that transport species and genes and bacteria from one place to the other where they would never have gone. So we have invasive species, thanks to plastic. But here is where hope starts. So new laws are on their way. I know you said they were too slow, but actually there is momentum. And we need to use this momentum that we have right now. Last year, the European Union adopted, in the span of 1 year, 6 different directives related in some way to plastic. That's not normal. It's completely amazing. It's something I had never seen ever, anywhere, in any area of work. We also had the sword policy from China when they decided, I'm not going to continue receiving all the world's trash. So they closed their borders. What happened? So developed countries started shipping their waste to all the countries nearby, Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam. What happened? They can't cope with the waste. They started closing their borders too. And now they're sending shipments of waste back to their countries where that waste came from. So what's going on? The politicians in the countries that were sending the waste are having to deal with the reality that the waste they produce won't just disappear and go away and stop being a problem. That is creating momentum for new legislation in many countries. Like, there was a report by the UN in December of 2018. More than 127 countries had adopted laws related to plastic in the span of the last 2 years. That is so much. I know it's just the beginning, but there is so much hope. So when I go to talk to companies, the first thing I say is, okay, you make your investments, you plan those investments really carefully. But if the horizon and the landscape you work in is changing constantly and is putting new requirements that you need to comply with, and on the side of that, there are people creating all these crazy technologies that some are good, some are awful. Bio-based plastics, plastics made out of shellfish, like crazy inventions, or that is disrupting the market that you're playing with. So changes in technology and changes in law are going to have to make you make rushed decisions. Rushed decisions usually are bad decisions, especially when it comes to putting your money into something. So if you want to be able to make good decisions, start future-proofing your company against the coming regulations. Have in mind that a ban on many plastic products is coming. Have in mind that regulation on plastic packaging is coming. And start thinking about how you can move away from the system you rely on, that relies on disposable plastic, and start thinking about distribution systems for your products that are based on reuse, for example. That is so smart. And on top of that, you gain a new market that you didn't have access to. Then your brand may become toxic. Yep. Nowadays, so many people sell the same thing. And the only thing that differentiates it is the loyalty of their customers, the ideas and the values they're associated with. What if people start thinking that your products are poison? Where is the value of your company going to go? Then, what about your employees? Do your employees think you're doing something good for the world, or do they think they work for a monster? There are statistics now showing that employees working for fossil fuel companies are very unhappy. Employees working for aviation are very unhappy. People from my generation and the generations to come have very high environmental conscience. They don't want to work for a monster. Where are you going to get the good employees? And what about other industries that are going to become your enemy? The plastic trash you put in the world creates damages to many other industries. What about the fisheries industry? They're fishing for litter now, and most of their catches are contaminated with plastic. What about hotels? Bali had to be closed for so many weeks last year because trash just washed in the beaches. And they had to close the beach, they had to clean it up, waited, a week lost in tourism. Don't you think, as an industry, putting that trash out there, that Hilton and Marriott are not going to come out after you if they're losing money? We have seen this happen before. Fisheries people right now are suing ExxonMobil, Shell, and oil companies because their fish are moving north because of climate change. This is more tangible than climate change. These industries are going to come after you. Break Free from Plastic, which is an amazing coalition of NGOs, has been organizing beach cleans that are not really beach cleans. They're beach audits. And they measure how many products with one brand or that can be attributed directly to a company appear in their beach cleans. That is an instrument that other industries are going to use to sue Coca-Cola, Nestle, Pepsi, and we're very happy to provide the evidence.
Yeah.
Litigation for environmental causes is on the rise. This is by the Grantham Institute of the London School of Economics. 1,328 climate change cases by May 2019. We know there is a link between climate change and plastic. Don't you think these people are going to become part of our movement too? Of course they will. And we have all that force behind us. And we're going to sue them. And we're going to win. So when I go and speak to these companies, I tell them, I'm coming here to speak with you first. I'm giving you a warning. But the next people that I'm going to go and speak to are the banks, the insurance, and your shareholders. Because you as company director may think that you're immune, but you're actually accountable to all these people who put money in a company for you to administer, and you're not administering this company the way you should. So I'm just going to tell these people that their money is at risk and that they should move it somewhere else. And we saw 2 weeks ago, the UN has a sustainable finance and insurance initiative. They sent an email last week, an annual survey, global, explaining that plastic is a business risk and that it has the same taxonomy of risk as climate change, and that it is a risk for insurance companies. I wonder how a change in the insurance premiums is going to affect the costs and is going to affect the profits of companies that produce plastic or are highly reliant on plastic. And Citi, Bloomberg, IHS Markit, Fitch Solutions, McKinsey, they have all released after our report in the summer of 2018. From then until now, they have been releasing reports saying plastic is a business risk. There will be a peak in the use of plastic. Plastic is not such a sure investment as you thought it was going to be. This is risky. Your money is not safe. They are raising the alarm, and we're using that alarm to go and engage with companies. But if they don't listen to us, we're going to go to the regulators, because companies are accountable, and they should be disclosing to their investors, to the banks, to the insurance, the risk that they are putting their money in. And if they don't comply with that disclosure, we're going to use the legal instruments to make them accountable. So there is hope. Like, if we can find tools to make companies accountable in private law, with the changes we're seeing in regulation, with the momentum, with the change in the European Union, I'm sure we're going to have so many more tools at our disposal, and we're going to be able to make the change.
Yay!
Thank you.